Before today's video, we want to bring you a word from AppZone, who is a regular sponsor of this channel. AppZone is an app that suggests games to play, and then you earn money for just trying the games. Then the longer you play, the more you'll earn. AppZone pays out instantly through retailers like Google Play, Xbox, Visa, Steam, Amazon, and more. Every week I seem to find a new game which is a lot of fun to play, and I'm getting paid out in Amazon gift cards. If you download AppZone by clicking on the link below the video, you'll be directly supporting Criminally Listed. So help us keep the lights on and start earning money for yourself for playing games by downloading AppZone today. Without any further delay, here's today's video. Number 3. Jean Guerin. On January 17, 2010, the police were called to a home in Saint-Julien, Quebec, Canada, because there had been a shooting. The residents of the home were 43-year-old Jean Guerin, his wife, Patricia Noel, and their children. Guerin was a known drug dealer who had served time in prison for breaking and entering. The shooting happened when two men pulled up in front of the home in a pickup truck. Guerin was apparently angry with the two men because of a previous drug deal that went badly, so he opened fire with his 9mm handgun. The men in the truck ran, but 40-year-old Francois Richard didn't make it very far. He was shot twice, and he died because of his wounds. Guerin pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in April 2011, and he was sentenced to life without the chance of parole for 12 years. A month after he was sentenced, the police received an odd phone call. The caller told the police that Guerin had asked him for a favor. Guerin wanted him to move a freezer in the basement of his house where his wife and children were still living. The caller said that there was a dead body in the freezer. The police went to the family's home, and sure enough, in the basement, there was a freezer with a man's body in it. He was identified as 42-year-old Eric Veal, who went missing on December 22, 2009, a year and a half before the police found his body. Veal had been shot once in the head. Since Francois Richard was shot outside of Guerin's home, the police didn't do a thorough search of his home. If they had done a thorough search and looked in the freezer, they would have found Veal's body. Guerin told the police that Veal came to his house to buy a kilo of cocaine. However, according to Guerin, Veal didn't plan on paying for the drugs, and he was just going to steal them, so he shot him and then put his body in the freezer. In November 2014, Guerin pleaded guilty to killing Veal, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, which is to run concurrently with the sentence that he is already serving. Patricia Noel, Guerin's wife, who knew about the body, was charged with mistreating a corpse and for being an accessory after the fact. Number 2. Madeline Carmichael. When Andre Carmichael of Brooklyn was 12 years old, his aunt asked him an odd question. She wanted to know how his twin sister was doing. Andre thought it was a weird question because he didn't have a twin sister and never remembered having one. He was so confused by his aunt's question that he asked his mother, Madeline, if he ever had a twin sister. She avoided answering the question, and then both she and Andre's 26-year-old brother, Gregory, who is also Madeline's oldest son, gave him a severe beating. Physical abuse from his mother and adult brother weren't unusual during his childhood. He remembered another beating that happened after he broke one of his mother's rules. She told him that he was never to go into the closet in her bedroom. A lot of the time, the door to the closet was blocked with a bookcase or a bed. One day, Andre and his sister, Sabrina, who was 6 years older than him, decided to look in the closet because they thought there were toys in it. They were caught, and they were both beaten. Eventually, Madeline gave up custody of Andre, and he was put into foster care. Several years later, in 1995, Andre went to a family reunion, and he confronted his older sister Sabrina. He wanted to know if he had a twin sister, and if he did, he wanted to know what happened to her. Sabrina told him to drop it because it would tear apart the family. In 1999, for the first time since he was a child, Andre went to visit his mother. He brought along his 3-year-old daughter, Andrea, who looked a lot like him. When Madeline saw Andrea, she recoiled and told Andre not to bring her around. Andre then told Sabrina that he was going to hire a private investigator to find out the truth about his twin sister. That's when Sabrina relented, and she told him that he did have a twin sister. Her name was Latanisha. Sabrina said that in November 1979, when Latanisha was 3 years old, Madeline got angry with her because she had vomited while she was eating dinner. Madeline and Gregory, who was 17 at the time, took turns beating the girl. She then stopped breathing, and moments later, she was dead. Instead of calling for an ambulance or the police, they put the body in a footlocker and then hid the footlocker in a closet. When the family moved a few years afterward, Madeline moved the body with them. She put the footlocker that contained her daughter's dead body in the bedroom closet of her new apartment. After hearing the story, Andre went directly to the police. On November 5, 1999, the police went to Madeline's apartment. They opened the closet door and found air fresheners, some incense, and boxes of baking soda. They also found the footlocker. They opened the footlocker, and inside was the mummified remains of Latanisha. Her remains were inside 4 plastic bags, and she had been wrapped in a baby blanket and a newspaper that was dated November 4th, 1979. Madeline and Gregory were both arrested. Madeline, who had terminal cancer, was convicted of depraved indifference to human life, and she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Gregory pleaded guilty to negligent homicide, and he was sentenced to 1 1/3 years to 4 years in prison. Madeline's neighbors said that she was a kind and caring person, but she was a little eccentric. She would complain that she heard babies crying, even though the superintendent of her building told her that no children were living in the building. Number 1. Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen was born in Fraserburgh, Scotland in 1945. He served 11 years in the military, and in December 1972, he got a job as a police officer with the Metropolitan Police Department in London, England. He lasted for about 8 months, and then he quit. After he quit, he stayed in London, and in 1974, he landed a job as a civil servant. Around the same time that he got a job as a civil servant, he started to frequent gay bars. He also spent a lot of time drinking at home alone. On December 30th, 1978, Nilsen was feeling incredibly lonely and decided to seek out some sort of companionship. At a pub, he came across a teenage boy who he thought was about 17 years old. The young man wanted to buy alcohol, but he was denied. Nilsen invited the young man back to his flat, and he accepted. They both drank until they passed out. When Nilsen woke up, he watched the young man as he slept. As Nilsen caressed him, he thought about how depressing it would be when he woke up, because he would want to leave. So Nilsen grabbed a necktie and started strangling the young man. The young man fought back, so Nilsen moved him towards a bucket of water. He forced the young man's head under the water and held it there until he stopped moving. After he was dead, Nilsen bathed his body. That night, he slept with the body in his bed. He then placed the body under the floorboards of his flat, which was on the main floor of a house. The young man that he killed was Stephen Holmes, and he was 14 years old. When he didn't come home, his family reported him missing. Nilsen lived with Stephen's body under the floorboards for 8 months. He then took the body out to his garden and burned it in a bonfire. He threw some rubber on the fire to cover up the smell. About 3 months after burning the body, Nilsen met a student from Hong Kong. Nilsen got the young man back to his flat and tried to strangle him. The young man was able to break free and he fled the flat. He reported the incident to the police and the police questioned Nilsen. However, the young man from Hong Kong chose not to press charges and Nilsen wasn't arrested. On December 3, 1979, nearly a year after he killed Stephen Holmes, Nilsen met 26-year-old Kenneth Ockenden. Ockenden was a tourist from Canada and he encountered Nilsen at a pub around lunchtime. The two drank for a few hours, then did some sightseeing, and then ended up at Nilsen's flat. Nilsen strangled him to death with an electrical cord. He washed the body, and then he placed it in his bed and slept with it. The next morning, he put the body in a wardrobe, and then he went to work. When he came home, he washed the body again and put it back in his bed. He then did sexual acts with the dead body. After he was done violating Ockeden's body, he put the body under the floorboards. When Nilsen was feeling lonely, he would pull the body out and prop it up on his couch. He would talk to it or simply watch TV with it. 5 months after Nilsen killed Ockeden, Ockeden's body was still under his floorboards, and Nilsen brought home a 16-year-old homeless kid named Martin Duffy. Nilsen tried to strangle him to death, but ended up drowning him in the kitchen sink instead. Nilsen kept his body in a wardrobe for 2 weeks, and then placed his body under the floorboards with Ockeden's body. In August 1980, 27-year-old Billy Sutherland, a gay prostitute, found himself in Nilsen's apartment. Nilsen didn't remember how he killed Sutherland. It would later be determined that Nilsen strangled him to death with his bare hands. The problem was that Nilsen was running out of room under the floorboards. When Nilsen was in the military, he was a cook, so he knew how to butcher meat. He dissected the 3 bodies that he had in his flat and disposed of the remains in several ways. He left the organs in places where animal scavengers would find them and eat them. He burned a lot of the remains in a bonfire and then buried whatever was left over. Then between September 1980 and April 1981, Nilsen supposedly killed 7 men. Nilsen didn't know the names of the 7 victims, and they have never been identified. After killing the men, he would keep them under the floorboards for a few months, and then dispose of them by dissecting them and then burning the remains in a fire. By September 1981, Nilsen had killed 11 men altogether, and under his floorboards and hidden around his apartment, he had 2 full bodies and the body parts of 4 other men. On September 18, 1981, Nilsen encountered 24-year-old Malcolm Barlow. Barlow, who had epilepsy, was sick in a doorway near Nilsen's flat. Nilsen brought Barlow back to his flat and called an ambulance. The next day, Barlow was released from the hospital, and he went to Nilsen's flat to thank him for helping him. Nilsen invited him into his flat for some drinks, and Barlow accepted. Nilsen killed him later that evening. Not long after killing Barlow, who was his 12th victim, Nilsen dissected his body. He then burned all the human remains that he had in his flat in a bonfire. Because of Nilsen's lifestyle, he wasn't exactly the most ideal neighbor or tenant. His upstairs neighbor constantly complained about the smell that emanated from his flat. Nilsen told his neighbor that the smell was just the house settling. Nilsen's landlord thought he was trouble. About a month after Nilsen killed Barlow, Nilsen's landlord told him that he wanted to renovate the house and offered him money to move. Nilsen agreed to move, and he moved into a house that was split into 6 apartments. Nilsen's apartment was in the attic. In the attic apartment, he couldn't store bodies below the floorboards, and he didn't have access to an outdoor space like the garden at his last flat. But those problems didn't stop Nilsen from killing. In November, then again in December, Nilsen brought a man back to his flat. He attempted to strangle both men, but both men escaped. Neither man reported the incident to the police. In March 1982, Nilsen invited 23-year-old John Howlett back to his flat. When Nilsen attacked him, Howlett put up a fight and even tried to strangle Nilsen into unconsciousness. Unfortunately, Howlett wasn't successful and he lost consciousness first, but he didn't die. Over the course of 10 minutes, Nilsen tried to strangle Howlett to death, but he still didn't die. So Nilsen filled up his bathtub and drowned Howlett. He stored his body for a day in the closet. The next day, he dissected the body. He boiled the hands, feet, and head. He cut up the rest of the body into tiny parts and flushed what he could down the toilet. The parts of the body that he couldn't flush, like large bones, he threw out with the garbage. 6 months went by, and Nilsen didn't kill anyone. Then in September 1982, he brought home 27-year-old Graham Allen, who was a homeless man. Nilsen attacked Allen as he ate an omelet, and he strangled him to death. Nilsen kept Allen's body in his bathtub for 3 days before he dissected him and flushed parts of his body down the toilet. On January 26, 1983, just over 3 years since he killed his first victim, Nilsen brought home 20-year-old Stephen Sinclair. Sinclair was strangled to death, and just like he did with his last 2 victims, Nilsen cut him up and flushed what he could down the toilet. A week after the murder, a plumber was called to the house because there was a block in the pipes. In the pipes, the plumber found some small bones and 30 to 40 pieces of flesh. At first, the plumber thought it was chicken meat. Not long afterward, it was determined that it was human flesh. Nilsen's neighbors told the police that he may have been the person responsible. They noticed odd smells coming from his apartment, and he was acting strangely after the remains were found in the pipes. He was arrested, and once he was in police custody, he confessed. He said that between December 1979 and January 1983, he killed 12 or 13 men and tried to kill 7 more. However, the true number of victims is believed to be 15. He killed 12 men in his first flat and 3 more after he moved into his attic flat. By the time he went to trial, only 6 of his victims had been identified. So he was only charged with 6 murders and 2 attempted murders. He was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison, and then he was later given a full life tariff. Nilsen died from a blood clot on May 12, 2018. He was 72 years old. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please subscribe for more videos just like it. Please don't forget to visit criminallylisted.com, where you can suggest cases and buy merchandise. Please also check out our Patreon page, where you can get access to an exclusive podcast. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.